Good morning, everyone. Wow, what an honor to be here in the new sanctuary. It's been a little while since I've gotten a chance to visit you guys here. My wife, Lori, sends her regrets. She wasn't able to be here this morning because there's a Chargers game on right now. So I am a football widower. And if you ever meet her, please never tell her that I just said that. She will kill me. You know, I, in many ways, belong here and feel at home here, and I just feel so honored and so tickled to be a part of this gathering this morning and to hear myself quoted alongside Ernest Holmes. I am so calling my mom when I get out of here and telling her that. That is pretty awesome. I think I've made it. But if you'd known me when I was a teenager or a kid, you would also know this, that this is in many ways the last place you would expect to find me. And I didn't grow up religious. My mother and father were wonderful, ethical, spiritual people, but we never went to church. I think we went to church one or two times, and they were two religious science churches. And our dear family friends were the Manns, and they were a big Catholic family. And they were Dutch immigrants like we were, and so we palled around a lot together. And sometimes I stayed overnight at their house. And on Sunday morning, of course, they all went to church every morning, and I got to experience Catholic Mass. And I thought, this is very interesting. It's like theater with no real story or anything, just a beautiful ritual experience. I didn't understand a bit of it and felt terribly out of place why everyone went up front and got the little snack and the drink but certain Catholics weren't allowed to go up. They weren't quite, good enough to deserve the cookie and the drink, and it all seemed rather puzzling to me. And then when I went to college, I found myself inexplicably drawn to, of all things, philosophy and religion, and that's where I started to feel most at home. But I never really understood the God business and didn't know quite what to do with all of that, why it was so passionately important to others and so completely irrelevant to others. And what didn't make sense to me about religion were all of the answers, that this is what God is, and this is what the universe is, and this is what a human being was. I was suspicious of all of those answers, because the philosophical question of, how do you know? It ruined it all for me. I'm like, sure, you can say and believe anything, but is it real? And so I kept getting drawn in my own growing studies as a community college student and later a religious studies major at UC Santa Barbara. I kept getting drawn to religious experience, not so much the metaphysics, or I should say the theology, all the explanations about what God is and what the world is. But I knew in my gut, in my intuition, that something genuine and authentic and important was happening in these wisdom traditions that drew me inexorably. And I just, how it is in this life. You love what you love, and you go there. And I just was drawn there, and now I'm so blessed to have this crazy career where I get to write and speak and teach and do all kinds of things around these questions. And I guess what attracted me most about the religions were not the answers to every mystery, because I love the mystery too much. I didn't want to ruin it by describing it. But I did find myself drawn into the experience itself of spirituality. So I guess early on, before I ever heard the phrase, I was more, like many of you are, spiritual than religious. And I was attracted to information or practices or advice that would actually help me change my life. It actually would actually therapeutically improve my mind. My happiness. I wanted my happiness to increase, my worry and my anxiety to decrease. And I thought, something in the spiritual paths addresses that. And I was drawn to that. And then I heard this story called the parable of the arrow that the Buddha told. Maybe some of you know this story. The Buddha said that once a man was walking through a forest with a bunch of his friends, and he was shot in the chest with a poisoned arrow. And they all knew it was a poison arrow and had to be pulled out immediately. And he's laying there on the forest floor with his arrow shaft sticking out of his chest. And his friends come up to pull it out, and he says, wait, before you pull it out, I have to know, what kind of wood is this on the shaft? Is this walnut or teak or mahogany or pine or oak? And the feathers on the end of the arrow, do you think they're from a hawk or a grouse or a turkey or a seagull or a raven or an albatross and the tip that's in my chest, do you think it's copper, obsidian, bone, wood? And who do you think shot it? Do you think it was someone from the Brahmin caste, the Kshatra caste, a male, a female? Is this an intentional shooting or an accidental hunting, like a hunting accident? Or maybe someone was just cleaning their bow and it went off, and he insisted on discussing all of these questions before the arrow was pulled out, and then he died the end. And of course, the Buddha is warning us with a story like that, isn't he? It's almost an anti-philosophy story. It's almost a story about the futility of dwelling too long in the intellectual puzzles that life presents. Is there a God? Is there not a God? Is there one God? Is there many gods? Is God a woman? Is God a man? Is reincarnation true, or you just get one life? Who made the world? Why? When? How long ago? What's it all? All of these questions Buddha was often asked in his life, and he always answered, these questions tend not toward edification. Of course, there's nothing wrong with those questions. I guess it's a sequence problem, right? Let's pull the arrow out and then make some tea and sit up all night and talking about the wood and the feathers and the tip. But Buddha's point is we often don't do the important work and get lost in the puzzles. And the important work is, of course, healing. The important work is moving out of disease, rooting out the dukkha or the suffering or the anxiety, the endless craving that tortures us, that robs us of our joy. That's the key work. There's a later Buddhist story that makes the same point much more succinctly. The Zen Buddhist master Huinen got to a monastery to visit, and two monks recognized him as a master, and they were in the courtyard. They were arguing about the flag, and it was a windy day, and the flag in the courtyard was flapping furiously, and the first monk said, "Look, the flag is flapping in the wind," and the second monk said, "No, it is the wind that is flapping around the flag." And the first monk said, No. It is the flag that is flapping in the wind. And the second monk said, "Idiot, no. It is obviously the wind that is flapping around the flag." And they saw the master coming and said, "Master, can you please settle this dispute for us? I say it is the flag flapping in the wind, and my friend says, no, it is the wind flapping around the flag. What do you say?" And the master said, "It is the minds of the two brothers that are flapping." So, I knew I was onto something when I stumbled onto Buddhism. I thought, here is a tradition that roots out all the chaff and helps us get down to the wheat. And is healthily cautious about the mind. What a great gift, right? The intellect, analysis, study, the ability to balance evidence and make arguments and test truth claims. And oh my gosh, it's like a joyous cathedral of truth-seeking, but it's also a terrible prison of empty theory that becomes a cage that keeps us locked away from actually living our lives. So, a double-edged sword of sorts. And then I discovered Gandhi, of course, and Gandhi is the source of the title of this talk today. Gandhi, of course, 1869, 1948, we all know who he is. This tiny Indian man who changed the 20th century and changed the world. Gandhi grew up in India, but he was not very religious either. His mother was. And when he went to England to study law and become a barrister, become an attorney, it was there in London that he fell in with some friends from the Theosophical Society. It's always your friends that get you into these crazy things, right? Here, try drugs. So he went to the Theosophical Society in London, and there they had a reading group reading the Bhagavad Gita and studying the Gita in Sanskrit and in English. So it's kind of ironic, Gandhi had to leave his homeland of India to discover India's most sacred and powerful spiritual text, the Bhagavad Gita. And Gandhi is such a great example because if there's anybody that blended spirituality and action, it was him. He's no cloistered monk. He's a political activist of the highest order. and believed that his spiritual roots drove him to action in the world. And so it's kind of humorous when a reporter asked Gandhi, "Sum up your philosophy in 3 words." You gotta love journalists, right? Really? I wonder what you would come up with if I asked you, sum up your entire life philosophy in 3 words. Well, Gandhi, without hesitation, said, "Renounce and enjoy." Renounce and enjoy. Now, what is renunciation? What is it to renounce? It's kind of a curious word. We don't use it much. Renunciation is to relinquish the illusion of control. It is to move out of ego mind and into a deep and restful state of acceptance and surrender. Renunciation is the conscious decision to stop resisting what is. To renounce is to declare your utter freedom from the tyranny of your arbitrary and self-serving ego desires. In a word, to let go. It is to look out at the world and see it as it really is, not through the lens of your endless needs and fears. You know, it reminds me of another great teacher, the preeminent teacher of Advaita Vedanta, the non-dualist traditions of India in the 20th century, Ramana Maharshi, who was asked one time, "What's your secret?" And he said, "I don't mind what happens." I put that on my refrigerator immediately when I heard that. I don't mind what happens. Oh, that's a tough one to practice, believe me. Particularly when your refrigerator breaks and water is flooding across the kitchen floor. I don't mind what happens. Really? Oh, I kind of do. But what a wonderful summation of the consciousness of renunciation. Gandhi, of course, was taking that from his favorite Upanishad, the Isha Upanishad, which has that phrase in it of to renounce, let go, and enjoy. And I want to look at both of those experiences today with you for a little while. Imagine it now. You can feel it, can't you? Why Gandhi coupled renunciation and enjoyment together. Because when you are in the consciousness of renunciation, enjoyment immediately wells up. Because everything is as it is. And you're not in this state of constant resistance to what is, which is the generator of all of our anxiety and worry and fear and disappointment. No more cravings, no more aversions, enjoyment. And so Gandhi is not advocating some sackcloth and ashes asceticism, like renunciation. Renunciation is often defined that way. If you look it up in online later, you'll see that the word is typically associated with ascetics who wander around the forest, don't have a house, don't have a car, don't have a family, don't have a marriage, don't have any property, don't have anything. That's not what I mean by renunciation. And that's not what Gandhi meant either. How can we practice renunciation as a consciousness here in our middle class lives with homes and cars and marriages and so on? But it's associated with renunciation because you are no longer burdened with the busy mind's endless assessments, and you're free to enter the eternal moment as a child, like in that beautiful song. That idea of seeing for the first time the world. Now, how can you tell when you've got it? How can you tell when you are practicing renunciation? It's easy. You feel it right here in the middle of your chest. A great softening, a great expansion, a great untangling. There's a wonderful line in the Katha Upanishad that describes this state. When all the knots that strangle the heart are loosened, one knows utter bliss. Wouldn't it be nice just to put it all down? Wouldn't it be nice to put down the need to be right? Yeah, I am on Facebook a lot, and I get into a lot of arguments with people. That's on my regular page, and then I go back to my spiritual author page, and then I'm all zen over there. And then I go back over here and start screaming about stuff. But So it's good to have two Facebook pages, your personal one that you can friend me on, and then the writer page where you can like me. For you, if you don't know what Facebook is, never mind. But wouldn't it be nice to put down the need to be in control? Wouldn't it be nice to put down the need to get in the last word, the need to shield yourself? What a lot of work it is to carry all of that. There's a wonderful Zen Buddhist saying, how refreshing, the whinny of a pack horse, unburdened of everything. There's another Zen saying that comes to mind. Don't seek enlightenment. Just get rid of all your opinions. That's why I'm typing them on Facebook all day. I'm trying to get rid of them, I figured. Just purge them out. It's not working. That whole government shutdown, I thought my head was going to explode for a couple of weeks. So, in other words, this is, I think, what Gandhi is also getting at. Joy or happiness is not a destination. It's not an end point, a distant goal, a future state that will only arise after we arrange all the details in our outer lives in accordance with our arbitrary ego cravings. Oh, if I could just have the right car, the right spouse, the right house, the right conditions, if my body was the right shape, if I had the right clothes, if I had the correct amount of money, if the weather was perfect, if all these conditions would just align with my cravings, that would be great. And then I would, at the end of that process, be happy. That's how most of us live. We think, I will be happy later when I solve these problems. And then every day you solve 3 problems and 4 more rise up. And you're like, I'm screwed, all right? This is never going to happen. I'm never going to be happy. So what if we shift all of that and reverse it and redefine happiness not as an end point, not as an achievement, but as our baseline default state, our starting point, our natural, like the way, remember VCRs, how they used to always just flash 12 o'clock? What if your soul's default, plug it in, boom, joy, 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 joy. Except now the ego and its cravings and its aversions cuts that out. We can't feel that anymore. The knots begin to tie and strangle around our hearts. It's a terrible irony, isn't it? That the endless search for happiness is the very mechanism that generates our perpetual dissatisfaction. Ouch. Let me say that again. Isn't it a terrible irony that the endless search for happiness is the very mechanism that generates our perpetual dissatisfaction? Renunciation would be that condition of consciousness where we stop searching for happiness and awaken to the baseline joy that is our nature, that seeking and craving cuts out. It's a challenging idea. Don't expect to go home and be blissed out the rest of your life just because you heard some guy talking today about this. This is the work of a lifetime of every conscious woman and man. This is the core insight of all of the spiritual traditions, to be liberated from the busy mind, to be liberated from fear. I'm reminded of Abraham Lincoln, who most of his biographers would characterize as, in contemporary terms, bipolar, what we used to call manic depressive. Certainly clinically depressed. In the 19th century, they called it melancholia. Sounds a lot sexier. Yeah, I'm a melancholic. Lincoln, there were times, when he was a young man, when his neighbors and his family put him on suicide watch. Hide the guns. Stay up all night with him. Don't let him. He's going to kill himself. Or when he was president, there were times when he couldn't get out of bed for days in a row. Can you imagine? This guy is so unelectable today. What a shame, right? Everybody's favorite, greatest president ever. A political disaster by today's standards. But his very woundedness, of course, gave him a vision and a courage that very few others had. But what I want to mention about him this morning, why I bring him up, is this. Even though he was so afflicted with chronic depression, he wrote, "Happiness is a decision." Isn't that remarkable? Long before cognitive therapy was invented, there's Lincoln realizing on his own, yeah, I can change my thoughts. I can just start choosing a new thought. Let's do some affirmations. Instead of living in the problem, let's live in the solution. Happiness is a decision. I can choose, despite how I feel, to be the author of my own experience. That's remarkable. And that's a form of renunciation again, to let go of the disease and move into the wellness. That morning is coming when you turn the key and the battery will be dead in your car. It's coming sooner for some of us than others. We were just talking about that for service. And you have in that moment an opportunity. There's a fork in the road right there. When you turn the key and it's dead, and you're like, you can go into anger, victim consciousness, all the money issues come up. Why don't I have a brand new car? And I'm going to be, the self-loathing about now you're going to be imperfect and you're not going to make it to work and people are going to talk about you and they're never going to believe the dead battery excuse. You're obviously lazy. And all of this comes up, or you could renounce in that moment and say, turn the key, click, and go, oh, today's the day that my battery doesn't work. And I knew that day was coming. Batteries last 3 years tops, and then they go. This is absolutely predictable. And my suffering is completely self-created, born in the strange illusion, the strange belief that car batteries are immortal. I don't know where you heard that exactly. But rooted in the impermanence of forms, we are always ready to let go. Because I know you know this, you don't get warning on a lot of this stuff. I went into the other room where I keep my sport coats. The other day I was going to go do a KPBS TV thing, and try to look decent. And I pulled out a favorite coat of mine, and it had a little like a white spot right here, the size of a pea. I thought, oh, got some chalk on it or something. I'm like, wait, I haven't used chalk since the 80s. Uh-oh. It was a moth hole, right, in this beautiful, $600 Ralph Lauren coat that I got for $99 at the outlet. But just a beautiful piece, a real philosophy professor coat. Tweed, had the suede patches. I mean, no. It was, and I just had that moment of like, I don't know if they can fix things like that. I doubt it. I think the insects have once again won. Life is a never-ending series of opportunities to practice renunciation, to practice releasing. I have an old dog. His name is Boone. He's a beautiful Brittany Spaniel. I love him dearly. He's 14 years old, though. And, for the animal lovers in the room, there's a very rough patch ahead. And he falls down all the time. He can hardly hear anymore. I have to get right in his face to kind of call him because he can't hear me. And the light really is gone from his eyes. There's a sort of darkness and a sort of sadness about him that I've never seen before. And I know that he's winding down. And I know that day is coming soon when I will have to lift him up and put him in the back seat of the car and take him to the vet that one last time. And I'll sit on the floor of the examination room with Boone in my arms, and the vet will come in, and the vet tech will come in, and they'll sit on the floor, all three of us, and they'll pull out those 2 syringes, one to sedate him and one to stop his heart, and I'll feel him take his last breath and go limp, and I'll be bawling in front of these virtual strangers, but I don't care. But I just feel like I owe that to him, that all these 12 years that we've had together, we got him when he was 2 from a rescue place. And all these 12 years we've had together, his favorite place is in my arms. And that's where he deserves to die. And so those of you that have gone through this before and had to put dogs down at that point of mercy, that's renunciation. But you know what? I knew this day was coming when I drove him home that day from the kennel. You have to say yes to that, right? That's how life is. Life isn't like a shopping experience where you just get to choose your experiences. If you want any of it, you must say yes to all of it. And that's the sense of renunciation, of like, I'm going to be okay with everything that's going to happen. So back to Gandhi and the Gita, I just think it's so interesting that he fell in love with this book. It became the most important book to him. He carried chapter 2 around in his pocket his whole life of the Bhagavad Gita. And he carried Jesus' longest speech, the Sermon on the Mount, in his pocket too. And he read them both every morning. I think that's pretty good morning pages. And it is from the Gita, I think, the Bhagavad Gita, that Gandhi learned renunciation first. And Gandhi learned how to bring that deep inner peace right into the midst of action. Because in the Bhagavad Gita, for those of you not familiar with this text, it teaches essentially three things. The whole book is one scene, two guys in a battlefield. Arjuna, the warrior prince, and his trusty sidekick, Krishna, who's going to drive the chariot. Boyhood friends. And the war is about to begin, and at the beginning of the book, Krishna and Arjuna are in the middle of the battlefield, and Arjuna says to Krishna, I don't want to fight. I don't want to do this. This is wrong. All this killing, what's the point? And he drops his bow, and his mouth goes dry, and he says, no, I'm not going to do it. And the whole rest of the book is Krishna encouraging Arjuna to take action and to fight. Now, for Gandhi, this book was not an authorization of war or even an authorization of violence. For Gandhi, the battlefield was a metaphor for the field of action in which you and I always find ourselves, where here we are. We have no choice but to choose. And even when you don't choose, that is still a choice, Sartre reminds us. So, no escape from freedom. And you must take action. And if you don't, there will be dire and terrible consequences. Oh, and if you do, there will be dire and terrible consequences. You're welcome. And so, to be alive is to be active in the world. But Krishna puts these three themes in. He says, Arjuna, first of all, you can relax about death because what we really are is unborn and undying. We are the eternal presence, the Atman, the divine self that was never born and will never die. Krishna says, there never was a time when you did not exist, nor will there ever be a time when you cease to exist. So reframe your thinking about life and death. As Eckhart Tolle says, life is not the opposite of death. The opposite of death is birth. Life has no opposite. And the second thing Krishna teaches Arjuna that is so important for Gandhi is that given the divine nature of our essential core, we have a very important role to play in the unfolding of the universe. We are the universe manifested as, insert your name here, and now go out there and be who you really are. Your talents, your temperaments, your gifts, your sensibilities, that is the universe's decision to express itself as you in the field of time. Be that person without fear and serve in any way that you can serve, because the way that you serve is how the universe needs to be served. The Sanskrit word is dharma, right? Purpose or service or duty. And third thing Krishna teaches Gandhi is you must act but without attachment to outcomes. Here comes the renunciation. You must take action, but you have no right to control the outcomes of your actions. You don't get to say what someone does with your gift. You don't give someone a shirt and then resent them because they never wear it. You know how someone gives you a really awful household decor gift, and every time they come over, you get it out of the closet, put it on the table, make sure they see that you're, and as soon as they leave, no. What would it be like to do your work without attachment to the fruits of work, as Krishna says? That's renunciation. To not demand or expect anything in return, but to just simply give. Confucius says, the inferior person asks, what's in it for me? And the superior person asks, what is the right thing to do? You notice the word I, me, and mine are not even in that last one. There is no me in any of that. It's just what is the right thing to do. Now, the reason Gandhi read all of that with the Sermon on the Mount is, and maybe we're more familiar with that famous speech, of course, Jesus touches on so many of the same themes through his Jewish consciousness that for Gandhi, the Sermon on the Mount is really a description of awakened consciousness and a deep state of renunciation. You know, Jesus talks about the unity of thought and action, that instead of worrying about the action of adultery, let's root out the consciousness of lustful craving. Instead of talking about the action of murder, let's root out the consciousness of anger and violence and so on. And then Jesus also, of course, teaches about the unimpeachable nature of God's love, that God's connection is a cord that can never be severed. It is part of you. This divine acceptance, this divine embrace that God causes his love to fall on the righteous and the unrighteous alike, unconditionally. And then, furthermore, that last piece, right, I think it's chapter 6 and mostly 7, where Jesus says, why are you worried? Why are you anxious? Why are you afraid? Boy, is that the most modern problem, the problem of anxiety. And Jesus says, if you knew what you really were, you would never be worried again. You would never have the consciousness of scarcity again if you knew what you were. What a Hindu thing to say. And you know, look at how the lilies of the field and the birds, and look how God takes care of them. Look how God's essence makes them beautiful. Do you not think that you benefit in precisely the same way and more? So for Gandhi to kind of dip into both of these teachings and turn the focus to the inner witness, that's a phrase Gandhi likes to talk about from the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, you know, out here we're always looking at the world through the lens of our needs and fears, but it's so liberating to renounce and instead move into the inner witness, shifting to the divine voice within, beneath the surface self, with its incessant cravings and fears. You know, it's kind of fun to practice this shift. Next time you get cut off in traffic, next time you have a road rage moment, you know, where someone drives really annoyingly right in front of you and you get angry, I suggest you try this. It's really fun. Notice that you're getting angry, and then shift to the inner witness and say, Peter Bolland's getting angry. Don't use my name, you know. That would make no sense. I'm not angry that someone just cut you off. So, but that's as simple as it is. Let's not turn this into some complex esoteric practice. It's a simple shift in consciousness to instead of reacting emotionally to the stimuli, to the stimulus, we simply shift to the inner witness and say, oh, look, anger is happening. And I promise you, when you practice this, that simple shift will take 50% of the intensity out of the anger, just like that. In other words, you don't have to fix it. Awareness is the healing. That's a relief, isn't it? I don't have to somehow become clever enough to stop being angry. All I have to do is catch myself being angry, shift to the inner witness and go, oh, look, anger is happening, and immediately half of it is gone. And you practice this, and you start getting better and better. That's renunciation. Letting go of the need to be right, letting go of the need to respond. So, just a couple more bits. You know, I was thinking about all of these things preparing for today, and I pulled down my father's little book, his autobiography called The Nightingale Sings Forever. He passed away a year ago this month at the age of 90. And he wrote this story about his life. And the part I want to share with you is this. When he was 19 or so, or 20, the Nazis invaded Holland. And he was Dutch, and he lived in Holland at the time. And Because he was a printer already and worked in a print shop, he was taken by the Nazis in 1942-43 back to Germany to be a slave laborer there in a camp and to print German war bonds and coupons and so on. So Europe is caught in the midst of this horrible war. It looks like the Germans have won. I know, looking back, we know it all turned out, the good guys won. But put yourself in the middle of it. You don't see that at all. The Germans had already conquered France. They had confiscated all the mansions on the Champs-Élysées. All the SS officers and generals were establishing their families in those mansions in Paris, which was going to be the world capital of their 1,000-year Reich. And there's my dad in Pritzwalk, Germany, living in a barracks, printing things. And he got to stay with a family for a while. And one night after he went he was walking through the village in the evening, and he writes really powerfully about this. He says, I was walking through the village, and all of a sudden I could hear a nightingale singing high in the branches of a linden tree. I couldn't see him. And all of a sudden, the song and its beautiful trills shot through me and lifted me out of the war. And I couldn't hear suddenly the distant artillery, which were a constant refrain. And he said, in that moment, I knew that I was going to be all right. In that moment, I knew that nature is somehow oblivious to the horrors of the human realm. That every spring the flowers bloom, every spring the deer give birth to fawns in the forest. Nature continually renews. And in that moment, I realized there was a deep spiritual stillness and rectitude and rightness and wholeness underneath the surface of fear. And in that moment, I knew that I was going to be okay. And that's renunciation. In the middle of even the worst situations, to know that there's something permanent and whole underneath it all. I want to close with a prayer, and I know some of you have heard this prayer. It's Father Michael Judge's prayer. I'm sure it's been spoken in this room. If not, it's high time. But some of you know the story. Father Michael Judge was a Roman Catholic priest and the chaplain of the New York City Fire Department. Oh, and gay, by the way. And on September 11, 2011, of course, he raced to the base of the towers when the first plane hit, and then the second plane hit, and all the firemen from the whole city were converging and running up the stairs with 60 pounds of hose on their back. And when the first tower collapsed, he was killed by falling debris. He was the first casualty on 9/11 with a name. And there's a very famous photograph of him being carried away. It's called the American Pietà. And he's slumped in a chair, and 6 firefighters are carrying him, and they're all covered with dust. You can Google that later and see that. But I want to share with you what they found in Father Michael Judge's pocket, speaking of people keeping great stuff in their pockets. And what they found was this prayer that he often recited throughout his life. And to me, it's the perfect expression of renunciation. Here's Father Michael Judge's prayer. God, take me where you want me to go. Let me meet who you want me to meet. Tell me what you want me to say, and keep me out of your way. And I'm not a religious guy, and I'm certainly not a Roman Catholic, but I know a good prayer when I hear one, and I've memorized that one, and I mouth that to myself silently as I walk across the parking lot on my way to my office every morning at Southwestern College, that the people that are going to bump into me, those are divine appointments. They're not interruptions in my work. They are my life. Some of the emails, yeah, those are interruptions. But the people that come into my life, let me say it again. God, take me where you want me to go. Let me meet who you want me to meet. Tell me what you want me to say, and keep me out of your way. So I hope that you, like me, find something practical in that simple 3-word mantra from Gandhi: renounce and rejoice. Write it on a Post-it note, put it on the dashboard of your car for that next traffic incident. And I hope that you can become humble enough to try it and feel not my authority, because I don't have any, but in my own life, but feel your own authority well up around that truth of renunciation and enjoyment. Thank you very much. Namaste. Thank you so much. Thank you.